not have a national plan, a federal plan to take on COVID. So the president or anyone else can say all day long, let's open the schools, let's open the bars, let's open the businesses. You cannot just open them without a massive program, without funding, without testing. So the big thing holding back the markets know until we actually have a plan to take this thing on, we're not going to get out from under this hole that we're in. And what's really sad is think about all that the market lost already because COVID continues to spread. And we've already put trillions in stimulus in there, but we don't have a plan.
NBC senior business correspondent Stephanie Ruhle, also anchor on MSNBC weekdays at 9 a.m. Stephanie, good to see you as always. Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Let's continue now with NBC's Monica Alba with the latest on the Trump campaign. Monica, what's the mood inside the campaign this afternoon, based partly on the vote totals that have come in and also based on the legal challenges that they've been talking about?
It's exactly that you mentioned, Joshua, where the focus seems to have shifted to the protracted legal strategy now, with the Trump campaign holding a press conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with the president's own personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and other members of the president's family. They are going to be spelling out some legal action they are taking in the Commonwealth, and it comes on the heels of the news that they are also looking at taking legal action in Michigan and demanding a recount in Wisconsin, both states that, of course, this afternoon, NBC News has now projected for former Vice President Joe Biden. It really tells you a lot, Joshua, about where they are. They've been huddling at the campaign headquarters in Virginia, trying to plot the next steps in this strategy. We're told that has also involved Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who've been trying to figure out when the public should hear from the president, if he's going to appear at all on camera today. He hasn't yet, but it's always possible that will happen in the next couple of hours. But they are very much focused on where this goes in the courts, as their path or potential for 270 just seems to become more narrow and narrow as we make these further calls. The Trump campaign had always felt more optimistic about the Sun Belt versus the Rust Belt. Of course, those three states were critical to his victory in 2016, but privately, campaign aides were quite worried about how the president would do in Michigan and Wisconsin. We're now understanding exactly why as we see this. But again, the Trump campaign remaining bullish that there could still be this path if they do indeed clinch Pennsylvania. And something that happened this afternoon that was completely striking and unusual is that the campaign is trying to call that state for themselves. Of course, NBC News has not projected that. And we should point out they're doing that prematurely. There are still more than 1 million votes that need to be counted in Pennsylvania. But it just gives you an insight into this battle. They want to make this last as long as possible, Joshua, trying to obscure what may be the former vice president's essential clinching of 270 in the next 24 to 48 hours. The Trump campaign saying they still see a path again, even though it appears to be a far more narrow one.
Yeah, the campaign is doing a news conference in Philadelphia now. Eric Trump said, among other things, we are going to win Pennsylvania, but they're trying to cheat us out of it. Referred to absolute fraud, rampant corruption in the way that the count is taking place. They are suing over claims that they have been prevented from being full parties to the vote counting. Vote counting, again, as we've said, is a public process. You don't have to be part of a campaign or report. We don't have any special rights that you don't have in terms of watching how the democratic process works. You could go to your elections office and just stand and watch them count ballots. Perfectly legal. And frankly, I think they'd be happy to see you because they would like you to see how transparent the process is. But the Trump campaign is alleging that there are some access issues there. I made an error earlier. And Monica, I do want to ask you about the path to victory. But I mentioned earlier that the paths to victory for the president are narrowing. I was driving the Kornacki slightly off the road, and I was in the wrong direction a little bit. Currently, Joe Biden has about 9 paths to victory mathematically. Donald Trump has about 3 paths to victory, and there is one scenario under which they could actually come to a tie. Lord Jesus. But with regards to the paths to victory, Monica, what is the mood of the campaign in terms of what seems most likely for re-election?
So they do continue to be very optimistic about Pennsylvania. Of course, those 20 electoral votes would be key, but we are not prepared to call that yet. They're also making these claims. They see something in the numbers in Arizona that, quite frankly, we do not see, and other outlets have called that race. NBC News has not yet. They believe that by Friday, by the estimation of some of the president's closest campaign advisors, there could be a split decision here in Arizona, with that going toward the Trump campaign campaign instead of the Biden campaign. Again, at NBC News, we have not verified that. It is too early to call just because of how close it is, and there's still a lot of the vote that's outstanding. But they are seeing something that they believe could tilt this in the direction of the president. Of course, that's a state they wanted to hold on to. It's really critical, we should point out, that the former vice president has potentially been able to flip it. But something else this could also all come down to is the state of Nevada, which for weeks the president's reelect effort has pointed out at signs that are encouraging to them. They thought they could potentially win it. Again, it's too early to call there, but that could be a state that this could all come down to. The Trump campaign's still waiting to see what happens in Georgia, in North Carolina, and again, Pennsylvania. All eyes on that to see where this potential path could go. You're right, there's that scenario of a tie, I believe, if the former vice president ends up getting Georgia and if the president ends up getting Nevada. That, Joshua, is quite a scenario we won't even get to necessarily, though 2020 has taken us to places that, sure, why not? An electoral college vote tie could be among them.
Yeah, I'm not going to. It could happen. It could happen. Mathematically, it could happen. If Joe Biden won Georgia and President Trump won everything else, then that would bring them to a tie. That would probably also bring us to our knees. Lord help us. But it is mathematically possible. It is mathematically possible. I wonder also, before I let you go, whether there's been a reaction from the campaign in terms of some of the president's posts on social media. Twitter has marked quite a number of them, stating that they are, let me get the verbiage correct, that some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4 that have been marked in just the last 15 hours. Any comment from the campaign on that?
No, Joshua, and what's notable is that now we're seeing Twitter actually flag some of the campaign's top surrogates and spokespeople's tweets as well, because they are making some of these same false claims about accusations of Democrats or others trying to steal the election when that is not accurate. There's no evidence to back that up. But the other place now where they're being flagged quite excessively is now you have even the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, tweeting victory in Pennsylvania when, again, nobody has called that state for Donald Trump. Now Twitter labeling that is an incomplete picture, and people really need to be aware of that information in the coming days as we try to see, once we get that full picture, what it looks like.
Thank you, Monica. That's NBC's Monica Alba joining us from Washington. And since Monica mentioned Pennsylvania, let's head there now, where election officials are working to count, as Monica said, about 1 million ballots. It's a state where every single vote is going to play an important role in shaping the outcome of this election for either candidate. As we mentioned, Pennsylvania currently is too early to call, leaning toward President Trump. Joining us now is MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing. She joins us live from the state capitol in Harrisburg. Chris, run down for us what's at stake for both of these campaigns in Pennsylvania. It seems like as we get closer with the vote count, Pennsylvania just gets more and more and more important.
And we were talking about this for months, right? That it could come down to Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes, which would be decisive right now for Joe Biden. Look, the race has been tightening today, and we've seen a lot of activity on both sides. We heard Joe Biden saying just a short time ago he thinks he can win. He's seeing the very strong numbers, winning 78% of those mail-in ballots, and they continue to come in. We have some new numbers in Allegheny County, which is around Pittsburgh. They just got 2 new big mail drops, about 25,000 more ballots there. They still have a lot to count there, about 111,000 ballots. They're still got to go through the machines in Allegheny. And then the all-important area around Philadelphia, where they still have about 120,000 votes to count. The reason Joe Biden was sounding so positive about Pennsylvania when he spoke just a short time ago is because those are areas that favor him. And again, the mail-in ballots favor him. They like that combination, Joshua.
Chris, can you talk to us about what's going on where you are? Looks like some people are demonstrating or protesting. What's that behind you?
Yeah, it's actually a little more like a party spirit, to be honest with you. This is a rally to make sure every vote counts. And it is such an interesting contrast between the way Biden folks are handling this and the way the Trump folks are handling this, you know, tweeting what is not true, that the president has won Pennsylvania. Here, they're reflecting what we've heard both from the campaign, from the governor, and from the Secretary of State here, which is that they want every vote to count. What we have heard over the last 24 hours here is be patient. We're going to take our time. We're going to make sure every vote gets counted. And that means it's not going to happen today like Wisconsin. There's not going to be a call like in Michigan, because those votes will continue to come in until 5 o'clock on Friday. And because of the numbers involved here, those 20 electoral votes, reams of lawyers have descended. By one estimate, about 500 different lawyers. And we've seen those lawsuits already starting to be filed on both the state and federal level. You were talking about this a little earlier, a way for Team Trump to maybe drag this out a little bit. But what we're hearing from election officials all across Pennsylvania is they're working 24/7. They would like to get this count done quickly, but accurately and fairly. What I'm hearing from a lot of the county commissioners is they think a reasonable expectation is that a majority of the votes will be counted by Friday. But again, they'll still be having some of those mail-in ballots coming in.
What's your sense of, I don't know how much you've gotten a chance to talk to everyday people today, but what's your sense of just the mood of people on the street in terms of how they feel being the center of the political universe? I remember how it felt for me as a Floridian back in 2000 with everyone kind of looking at us, wondering if we knew how to vote. That was fun. What's the mood in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg among folks right now?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, let's say that this is the state capital, so it's a pretty political town, right? And I don't think that anybody would misunderstand if I said there was a sense of angst, stress, disbelief on the part of a lot of folks out there as they were watching the results come in, even though they had been told that it could come down to something like what we're seeing now, that this is a very different kind of election in a time of COVID. These mail-in ballots were going to take time to count, and indeed they have. But certainly here, they've seemed to make that turn, at least on the Democratic side. Union, a bunch of progressive groups, again, Joe Biden supporters, just all coming out. They're going to have speeches. But basically, I think it's really a show of support. There's been a lot of activity against the Secretary of State here, who's a Democrat, against the governor, who's a Democrat. And what they're saying is let the process work, which is what we've heard, again, from Joe Biden. I don't think you can take out of any of that the fact that he sounded a little more optimistic when you see some of the reaction here, Joshua.
Thank you, Chris. Much appreciated. That's MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansen joining us from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Much more to cover as we go on, but as we close in on the end of this hour, let's take a minute to just catch our breath and look back over the last 24 plus hours at some of the sights and the sounds of Decision 2020.
It is Tuesday. It is election morning 2020 at long last.
It's all over but the voting.
This meant so much to me that I woke up at 3:30 this morning.
We've already seen that this morning. Here's a live look at voting lines across the country. Just a snapshot of what's already going on at this early hour.
I think we're going to have a great night, and we're going to have, much more importantly, we're going to have a great 4 years.
Deep breaths. It's going to be a long day and a long night.
Vice President Joe Biden arriving at St. Joseph's Church in Wilmington, Delaware, and moving through the graveyard where rests his son, Beau Biden, who died 5.5 years ago of cancer.
Winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not.
In New Hampshire, it looks like Joe Biden will win. We project him as the winner. And as we come up on the midnight hour, a big call now for President Trump in the state of Ohio. NBC News projects that Trump will win Ohio and take its 18 electoral votes.
I have never seen the country as deeply and sharply divided as it is now.
It's kind of a jump ball at this moment.
Look, Hugh Hewitt said it. He said coin flip. I think that's where I'm at right now. I'm not ready to say I think I know anything about what we thought Wisconsin and Michigan do. A lot of that early vote we still get counting.
We've got a big call to make. It's official now. NBC projects Florida goes to President Donald Trump. We've been watching this all night. We've been very careful. But this is going to go into the Trump column, an absolute must-win for him.
We've got a call in Minnesota. NBC News projects that Joe Biden will win the state of Minnesota, 10 electoral votes.
It's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
The outcome is not certain at this hour, and that both candidates are very much in this race. So there's no reason to say anything other than that. We have got an electoral battle going on right now with a lot of votes left to be counted.
The president went to the East Room and did something that we've never seen before in American history, which was an American president falsely claiming a victory in a presidential election that he has not earned.
It's been a roller coaster all night. During and soon after the president's remarks, we saw the futures market take a serious dive, because what's really important is to trust the process and follow the process.
Good morning. No decision 2020. The presidential race still up for grabs, with millions of votes being counted in crucial battleground states.
The mantra used to be Florida, 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 but that has clearly changed, and there's a very good chance this entire election could come down to what's happening here in Pennsylvania.
Biden has the lead in the tabulation in Arizona, in Nevada, in Wisconsin, and in Michigan.
Well, look, as we were telling you, as we would see very slowly, some of these numbers come in Michigan for the first time. Well, he didn't do it yesterday, so it's the first time Joe Biden now leads in Michigan. He's pulled ahead. Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Maine, we think there's going to be some action.
Let's put it up here. I think NBC News is now projecting Joe Biden is the apparent winner in the state of Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes. That was an important prize in the Democrats' blue wall. So again, NBC News projecting that Joe Biden, the apparent winner of Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes.
Washington feels more chaotic than ever. It's my job to ask the tough questions, left and right, and help you make sense of it all.
You ready to go to work?
I'm so ready to go to work.
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala, Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
President Trump and Joe Biden hit the trail. At the center of this campaign, coronavirus.
The story.
The battleground blitz as we enter the final stretch of the 2020 race.
From every angle.
If you were sitting here talking to Joe Biden and President Trump, what would you want to tell them right now?
On the ground.
The winds fanning these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
And in depth.
We now have 2 vaccine trials on hold. Should people be concerned?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you. Whether you're back to school.
What do you guys think? We're excited?
Or back to work. We're keeping you safe.
I love being back.
Every morning on Today.
Police murder of unarmed black men has been an American way of death across centuries. After seeing the most comprehensive police reform bill ever introduced in Congress, I've begun to wonder if now is the time. If now is the time the protesters finally win.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, weeknights at 10 on MSNBC.
There are millions of votes yet to be counted.
I think it's still a marathon, and the finish line actually hasn't been crossed until all the votes are counted.
Every legal vote in Georgia will count.
Every vote that is legitimately cast and is good, it gets counted.
The election workers here behind me, they have not gotten a wink of sleep. I've met people with Band-Aids on their fingers because of the paper cuts.
It's the day after election, and now we have to wait 4 days to find out who won.
think that's absolutely absurd.
The Trump campaign is now announcing that they will request a recount in Wisconsin.
We've had a recount before, and it showed that we have a really good process.
Just sit back and wait, I guess, and we don't have any choice but to wait, right?
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching special election coverage on NBC News Now. How's everybody doing? The last polls closed about 16 hours ago, but the White House still hanging in the balance. Here's where things stand right now. According to our NBC News projections, both candidates are still several states away from getting to 270 electoral votes. NBC News projecting Joe Biden as the winner in Michigan. That puts him at 253. President Trump at 214. We are watching the battleground states that are either too close to call or too early to call. Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona. Those states will determine the outcome of this election. Joe Biden says he is optimistic about his path to 270, but President Trump could still win this race. Trump claiming a premature victory overnight. Today, he's asking for a recount in Wisconsin and filing legal action in Michigan and Pennsylvania. Now, over on Capitol Hill, the Democrats will keep control of the House, but they have a shrinking chance of taking a majority in the Senate. There are still a few Senate races to watch, though. In Georgia, one special election will go to a runoff. The other race, still too close to call. Arizona, still too early to call. North Carolina, also too close to call. We will get into all of those races coming up in just a bit. Our NBC News correspondents are in the battleground states where the votes are still being counted. The final vote count in this historic election could still take days. So let's dig into the numbers at this hour. NBC News political editor Carrie Dan is here. Carrie, I will let you pick. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. Where do you want to start?
Well, so let's start it this way. Let's kind of start in the Southeast and we can move around sort of counterclockwise. Okay?
Love it.
So in the last hour, NBC News called Michigan for Joe Biden. That probably puts Biden within, as a projection, probably puts Biden within about one or two of these states. So starting with Georgia in the Southeast there. In Georgia, Trump has a lead of about 1.6 percentage points. We're classifying that race as too close to call in Georgia. The outstanding vote there is about 200,000 ballots, we think. And the reason that the Biden camp is optimistic about that, they think that those votes are mostly coming from suburban Atlanta. That's an area, it's very diverse, it's very affluent. It's the kind of suburban area that has been favorable to Biden and to Democrats, not only this cycle, but in 2018 as well. They're hoping they've got enough vote there to close that gap. Now, in North Carolina, President Trump has a slight lead. We are characterizing that race as too close to call. We are waiting on mail ballots there. They can be received as late as next week. So we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait to get our arms around exactly what those ballots look like. This is a state that's looking favorable for President Trump right now. But Trump's problem is, even if he wins here, he's still going to be falling short of that 270 number. Now, going kind of north, let's go to Pennsylvania. It's too early to call. And this is sort of the center of the political universe right now, because Donald Trump has an advantage of somewhere around 5.5 points. But Biden thinks that he can make that difference up with the vote that is still out in Democratic areas in the state, areas like around Philadelphia and around Pittsburgh. Now, earlier today, Joe Biden said they're winning 78% of the mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania so far. He thinks that's enough to make up the gap. The Trump campaign argues they still think that they have enough to offset those gains from Joe Biden. And my colleague, Chris Jansing, actually says that count could take until Friday. So we've got a little bit of time there as well. Now, going over to the West, let's talk about Nevada. That's a race that is too close to call. We're waiting on votes from Clark County, a favorable area for Democrats. This is looking good for Joe Biden, but still we cannot make a projection there at this time. And then in Arizona, too early to call. We're waiting on a chunk of Maricopa County. That's a really key part of the state. About 2/3 of the vote comes from there, and we're just waiting on those votes. Now, one more state that I want to talk about is Wisconsin. We call Biden there today. NBC News calls him the apparent winner. Now, NBC projects that a candidate has won that race. That's Joe Biden, but the results are so close that the outcome could depend on a potential recount. And the Trump campaign has requested a recount in that key state of Wisconsin. I will note there have been statewide recounts in Wisconsin before that have not significantly changed the vote outcome or even the number. It's only by a couple hundred. And so some of the state officials there are saying the margin might be too much for Trump to change very much there. Now, Biden has said in the last hour that his campaign believes that they have a good path to 270, and the Trump campaign's is very, very narrow. If you look at that map, they really have to run the table. They have to hold Georgia. They have to hold North Carolina. They'd have to win in Pennsylvania, and they would have to pick up one of those remaining states, either Arizona or Nevada. Now, they've launched a host of some legal challenges in a variety of these states, including Pennsylvania, that recount I mentioned in Wisconsin and Michigan. They say they're going to take every measure to make sure that every legal ballot is counted. But at this hour, Joe Biden's path looks like he only needs to pick up one or two of these remaining states. Trump's path is quite a bit more narrow.
So, Carrie, I have to ask on behalf of our viewers, for people who went to bed last night and thought, I can't believe this isn't over yet, for people who are sitting here at, a little after 5 Eastern thinking, oh, my gosh, it's almost dinner time a day later. Am I going to go to bed tonight and not know who the next president of the United States will be? What does this evening look like for people? What do the next couple of days look like for people? What kind of expectations should they reasonably be setting here?
Well, we know that in the key state of Pennsylvania, it's probably going to take until Friday to count all of those votes. In North Carolina, it's going to take until next week to count those. Now, we're still waiting on Nevada, which we think we're going to see tomorrow morning. Arizona, the timing is a little bit unclear here. So I think it's probably a good bet that there's going to be some uncertainty going into the evening. Now, I will note, though, that it is not that much of a surprise to political watchers on both sides of the aisle that this process is taking long. A lot of folks, both Republicans and Democrats, were warning going into yesterday and weeks before that this might take a long time. Yeah. That's because there are these mail ballots because of the pandemic. There's an unprecedented number of mail and early ballots, including in states that have never processed anything like this before. So both sides had been saying, look, this might take a while. Be prepared to be patient. The fact it's taken this long is not a huge surprise. But at the same time, I bet the Biden campaign sure wishes this thing had been over last night. And we weren't still sitting here today.
I'm sure they do. And Carrie, you said it. I mean, just anecdotally, I've been getting texts from family and friends over the last 24 hours saying, what the heck is going on? And when I say to them, this is not abnormal. We were expecting this. We were not expecting to have all of the answers. They question me. They ask if I'm crazy, because we had known that the process might play out like this, given that it's a pandemic, given that so many people are mailing in ballots. But I think it's still hard for a lot of people to wrap their brains around going to bed on election night and not knowing who the next president will be.
That's absolutely true. And I think for Democrats, too, there had been a hope that they were going to have a big night in the Senate and in the House. That did not pan out. So they were a little bit demoralized last night because of that, not only because there wasn't a decisive election night win for Joe Biden, as many of them had hoped, but they also appear to be at a disadvantage now. They thought that they were going to have a very clear shot at getting a Senate majority. That to now has not panned out, although we're still waiting for a couple of races. And they've been losing actually some incumbent Democrat House seats that they had hoped to hang on to and to grow their majority there. So for Democrats, I think last night was a rough night that way. And waking up this morning and going through this kind of chaotic day with a lot of vote counting and a lot of uncertainty it's a tough place for both campaigns to be. And you're seeing Republicans trying everything that they can. They say that the Trump campaign says they're looking at every option to make sure all the votes are counted. But there's a lot legally that they're trying to do that at least so far isn't getting a lot of great reception from the legal community. So it's gonna take a couple of days to work all of this out.
Well, Carrie, I'm going to let you go because I know you have a lot more numbers to run through. But before I do, before we go, and I know you'll be coming back to us again in later hours, but before I let you go, if you had to sort of characterize where we are right now in a sentence or two, what would you say to folks to just kind of break it down in simplest terms?
I think something unexpected will have to happen, which, of course, this whole campaign has been very unexpected. Right now, Joe Biden has the clearest shot to winning a couple of these states that he is favored in if something very unexpected happens, or if the Trump campaign is able to launch a legal complaint against one of these in one of these states that slows the ballot or somehow changes it. But right now, I think Joe Biden, you'd much rather be Joe Biden than be Donald Trump right now.
All right, Carrie, Dan, thank you so much for walking us through where we are right now. We'll catch up with you in a little bit.
All right, great.
Joe Biden addressing his supporters in Wilmington, Delaware in the last hour with running mate Kamala Harris by his side. Here he is.
I'm not here to declare that we've won, but I am here to report when the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners. Of special significance to me is that we've won with the majority of the American people. And every indication is that the majority will grow. And it's been a long and difficult campaign, but it's been a more difficult time for our country, a hard time. We've had hard campaigns before. We've faced hard times before. So once this election is finalized and behind us, it'll be time for us to do what we've always done as Americans, to put the harsh rhetoric of the campaign behind us, to lower the temperature, to see each other again, to listen to one another, to hear each other again, and respect and care for one another, to unite, to heal, to come together as a nation. Now, every vote must be counted. No one's going to take our democracy away from us. Not now, not ever. America's come too far. America's fought too many battles. America's endured too much to ever let that happen. We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not surrender. My friends, I'm confident we'll emerge victorious. But this will not be my victory alone or our victory alone. It'll be a victory for the American people, for our democracy, for America. And there will be no blue states and red states when we win, just the United States of America.
Joe Biden, now the projected winner of Michigan. He picks up 16 electoral votes there. Michigan saw record-breaking voter turnout. That is, of course, where we find NBC News Now reporter Dasha Burns. She is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, her home away from home. Dasha, this was an incredibly close race. Biden won by about a point. We have been watching this state so closely over the last 24 or so hours. Tell us more about the turnout there and how that played into Biden's narrow victory here.
Allison, so good to see you awake and well in the middle of this long journey of an election that we have here. A record turnout here in the state of Michigan, 5.3 million votes, the majority of those cast by mail. The last record here in Michigan was in 2008, around 5 million total turnout, of course, for Barack Obama when Joe Biden was also on the ticket. But despite the race being called for president, Allison, here the votes are still being counted. I'm in a center here in Grand Rapids with 58,000 absentee votes here right now, and they are going to be counting until they've gotten through every last one of them. Take a look behind me here. These people have been working since 7 a.m. yesterday. They are getting close here. Some of the final ballots getting tabulated. We've been watching this process, and of course, we've talked about the patience, Allison. It's a slow process. It's methodical. We've given you an inside look at this before. Take a look here. These folks sitting near the computer, they have been working on a process that also takes quite a bit of time. It's called adjudication, where they look at any ballots, whether they have an ink stain, a coffee stain, any sort of stray marks. They work together to decide what the voter's intention is. And they've got Democratic and Republican challengers working together on that process. So Democrats and Republicans have access to oversee how this piece of it works. I'm going to bring you over this way with me. These ballots, these stacks of ballots here, they have already been counted. As you can see, there are a whole lot of them. So we are getting close, and we are looking at pretty shortly, hopefully, getting results out of the city of Grand Rapids. Now, Allison, we've talked about Kent County a lot over the past year. This has been traditionally a Republican stronghold. Right now, Kent County numbers show Donald Trump ahead by about 12,000 votes, but 58,000 votes are sitting here right now. So once Grand Rapids is called, once those votes get delivered, that race is going to shift. And that's what we've been seeing across the state of Michigan and across the country. I just need to remind our viewers that what's happened in the race here in Michigan, this is pretty much what we expected. We've said many times in our reporting, it's likely that on election night and election morning, the race will look a certain way. And then once the absentee votes from some of these big metro areas start coming in, that race is going to shift. And that is what we've seen happen. So now Joe Biden is the projected winner. We are still waiting, though, on the results from this key Senate race here. Gary Peters and John James still neck and neck right now. And the ballots here in this room right now, they could potentially make a big difference in that race as well. Allison.
All right, Dasha Burns in Kent County, Michigan. We were quick to say yesterday you might not be there for much longer. Still, you're home away from home. You're still there, but it looks like things are wrapping up at least.
The clock's ticking, Allison.
Thanks, Dash. And joining me now, Axios political reporter Steph Kite and Politico Playbook's Anna Palmer. Anna and Steph, we've just been talking about Biden's win in Michigan. It, of course, gets him closer to 270, but Pennsylvania is still outstanding. So this race is down to the wire for both campaigns. Steph, let me start with you. The win in Michigan, how do you characterize where we are right now?
Yeah, that was certainly an important state for Joe Biden to win, and it definitely makes it more likely that he will pull this off to 270. We're still waiting for some key state results that turn out. We're still watching for official results out of, Nevada and Arizona, Pennsylvania, as you mentioned. But winning Michigan and Wisconsin were really critical for Joe Biden having a few paths to that 270.
Anna, your take on where we are right now. We've been saying throughout that this is not over, but the path certainly seems to be a little bit easier for Joe Biden at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I think, as Carrie Dan said, Democrats were really depressed last night. They hoped for a sweep in a way that didn't occur. And right now there's been kind of this slow, methodical plotting today of Joe Biden coming back. This Michigan call is huge, obviously, for him. Wisconsin was huge for the Biden campaign. There's still a ways to go, but he certainly has more pathways and appears to be closer than the Trump campaign, which, you can always tell when a campaign's down and out when they start looking at legal ramifications. They talk about recounts. They're not actually just talking about getting the votes counted.
Yeah, legal action isn't usually the first step you take. It tends to be when your back is against the wall. And I know we've been talking a bit throughout the day about how many of us in the media or political analysts did expect that this process would take a little bit. We were not expecting to go to bed last night and necessarily have a winner. Anything, though, over the last 24 to 36 hours that has been particularly surprising to you?
Yeah, I think we all expected this case scenario, right? And I think tried to really get people ready for it, to say, hey, there's a lot of these states, Pennsylvania in particular, that aren't going to be doing any of their counting early. I do think what's happening in Nevada and kind of how actually slow it has been, we're not going to even have an update until tomorrow. It has been a little bit surprising. I would also say what we're seeing in North Carolina, just in terms of the fact that they're not even going to start counting some of these absentee ballots until next week, really puts things into perspective in terms of it's not going to necessarily be tonight where we're going to know, maybe the next couple of days, but this could drag on for, at least several days, if not a couple of weeks, when things are actually all certified, all the legal challenges are kind of finalized, and we'll really see who actually wins.
Steph, anything shocking or surprising to you, whether it came from the candidates themselves or how the results have been coming in?
I think you're right that we did expect for this to take some time. And I think, some states have been surprising to me based on my conversations with officials and Secretary of State offices in North Carolina, in Georgia. I think I was expecting to have results a little bit quicker out of those states. Similarly in Nevada, I think the length of time that we're looking at now is a little bit surprising. But again, going into this, we knew that there were going to be issues with some states moving to mass mail-in ballots. Many of these states without very much experience with that, so we were expecting that. And yeah, I think seeing how the Trump campaign is reacting with litigation so soon is something that we were prepared for, but certainly something we're keeping an eye on to see where that goes. Of course, they're claiming that they're looking good in Pennsylvania, but also joining in litigation there.
All right, you can see it on the map. Biden 253, Trump 214, but we still have a handful of states in the gray. We need to figure out which way those will go. Steph and Anna, thank you both so much for being with us. Stick around. We will come back to you a little bit later in the hour. Right now, the race in Pennsylvania is still too early to call. Governor Tom Wolf stressing that votes are still being counted, and we might not have the final results today. We might not have them tomorrow. NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis is in Philadelphia tonight. MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing is in Harrisburg. Chris, first to you, the ballots can be counted in Pennsylvania until 5 p.m. on Friday, as long as they are postmarked on or before Election Day. So what's the latest on the vote count there and the timing?
Yeah, they're continuing to come in. I keep in touch with election officials, county commissioners all around the state. There seems to be kind of a consensus that Friday is reasonable. Certainly, they're continuing to count, not just count the votes, but collect those votes. I think in Allegheny County, and I'm sure Rahema will talk about this, 2 new batches came in just today. Let me show you, though, what's going on behind me, because it's getting dark here, but it's beautiful on the steps of the Capitol here in Harrisburg. Every vote counts. Everyone counts. This is a rally essentially supporting Joe Biden, supporting the Secretary of State, who's been under fire. There have been calls for her resignation from Republicans, and the governor, all of whom who have said, let's take it nice and easy. Let's make sure that we're doing this exactly the way it needs to get done. No questions about the legitimacy of this process. In fact, listen to what the governor had to say just a little earlier today.
Pennsylvania will have a fair election, and that election will be free of outside influences. I will vigorously, and we all will vigorously defend against any attempt to attack that vote in Pennsylvania. And every Pennsylvanian can have confidence in the outcome of this election.
I've lost my IFB, so I don't hear you. But presumably you played what the governor had to say, Allison. Again, I think one of the things that is such a stark contrast between the Republicans and the Democrats is this rush that we're hearing from the Republicans. We already saw today members of the Trump team tweeting that they had won Pennsylvania, which of course is not true. Again, draw the contrast to what we're seeing behind us, what we're hearing from the governor and Joe Biden. But here we are, where we said we very well might be from several months ago, that it could all come down to Pennsylvania, the 20 electoral votes looking like even more of a prize tonight than they have been before. Allison, and sorry I can't hear you.
And no apologies necessary, Chris, picking up without missing a beat. So let's go over to Rahema. Rahema, Trump campaign officials and some of the president's lawyers are in Philadelphia. What have they said about the legal action they are taking, planning to take there in Pennsylvania?
Allison, what they're saying is that they want to stop the counting of those ballots. They claim that they're being done illegally, that they're not allowing Republican representatives to see what's going on. They say that that's in violation of what voters' rights are, that there should be a transparent process. What the state says is essentially bring on the lawsuit. They've been talking that they were expecting that there would be challenges to this counting. And they feel so confident that they would win such a challenge because of what's going on in this building behind me. This is actually what some people have been calling a counting factory. Here in Philadelphia, they are counting all of those mail-in ballots that are coming in this center. In addition, they are allowing people to see what's going on. There's even a camera inside that is streaming video of the count while it's underway. In addition, there are independent certified poll watchers who are inside. Authorities say that they also have inside of this building certified Republican as well as Democrat representatives who are certified as poll watchers to keep a look over what's going on. So they are ready to respond to any challenge from the Trump campaign, and they dispute any accusation that this process may not be transparent. They said, you can see it. Clearly, you can see it. Allison?
Rahima Ellis in Philadelphia, Chris Jansing in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, still very much in play tonight. Thank you both so very much.
Sure thing.
Millions of votes still need to be counted. Both President Trump and Joe Biden waiting to see who's heading to Inauguration Day and who is going home. They might not know for days. NBC News correspondent Mike Memoli is in Wilmington, Delaware, tracking the Biden campaign, of course. And for the latest on the Trump campaign, NBC News political reporter Monica Alba. Mike, we'll start with you. We heard Joe Biden taking a different approach, a very different approach than President Trump in his speech today. Tell us more about what Joe Biden had to say and what the mood is like in his campaign.
Yeah, Allison, for the Biden campaign, it's all about trying to set the tone. We saw Joe Biden last night, the first one to come out and speak to the public, only briefly into the parking lot behind me to the assembled cars for the drive-in election night, to say he was confident that when the votes would be counted that he was in a strong position, but otherwise heading off the stage rather quickly. Today, a little bit of a longer speech in which he did a number of things. One, he said, I'm not here to declare victory, but then he ticked off state by state what was falling in his favor, what he expected still to come. The clear indication of those remarks being he was going to be the next president of the United States. But more than anything, he struck a very clear contrast with President Trump to say that he was going to unite the country, saying especially now we need to not look at each other as enemies, and that he would be a president for all Americans. Now, this is all coming as, of course, the Biden campaign is preparing for what we're seeing on the Trump campaign side, which is a legal fight to stop the vote counting in Pennsylvania. Bob Bauer, a top lawyer for the Biden campaign, said earlier today that if you notice, you won't see Donald Trump at the Supreme Court, despite what he said last night. He said if and when he goes to the Supreme Court, based on the word specious is a word he used a lot on this call. I didn't go to law school, but I don't think it was a compliment. The claims that he was making for why the Supreme Court might intervene in this case, he said that president would suffer the most embarrassing defeat of any president before the highest court in the land. So confidence that as we see more states, Wisconsin and Michigan, the latest falling for Biden, that they are on the path to 270, but also getting ready for a war of words, the public battle with the Trump campaign about whether and how these votes should continue to be counted.
Mike, I didn't go to law school either, but yeah, specious is definitely not used as a compliment, that's for sure. Monica, the president falsely claiming victory overnight before all the results were in, saying he's heading to the Supreme Court over ballot counting. Take a listen.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay?
Monica, what is the Trump campaign strategy tonight, and how has it changed today? It seems like it's gone from victorious overnight to litigious this evening.
That's a great way to put it, Allison. And we just got some breaking news in, which is that the White House has declared a travel photo lid, meaning we don't expect to see the president on camera in any capacity today. We've only really heard from him on his Twitter feed throughout the afternoon, making a lot of claims that the social media company has had to label as misleading or false. The president just in the last 20 minutes or so declaring himself the victor in certain states that, of course, haven't been called yet, certainly not by NBC News or other organizations, because they're simply too close to call. But you're right, Allison. Overnight, the president wanted to project some optimism. He even said the words that we have won this election, again, despite millions of votes still being counted in key battleground states. And then throughout the course of the day, it turned to a much more protracted legal strategy. Now, with the Trump campaign unveiling some new legal action in key states like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, and NBC News obviously called Michigan and Wisconsin both for former Vice President Joe Biden, Midwestern states that would have been important to a path to 270, but that Trump campaign aides were not feeling so optimistic about in recent weeks. Now we are learning why. So the Trump campaign now just seeing taking a very, very narrow path. It still exists, but a lot of things need to go their way in order for that to happen. So that's why you see them focusing on the actual court battles and what may take place in the days to come, putting the focus on that. But again, we can't stress enough, Allison, it's really just been a lot of misinformation from the president, his top aides and surrogates on Twitter this afternoon about where they see themselves in this race.
Monica, I mean, outwardly, President Trump has seemed pretty confident, or at least he did overnight. What are your sources telling you about the vibe within the campaign, for lack of a better word? And aside from legal action, do we have a sense of what they see as their best chance of getting to 270? I mean, are they just praying for Pennsylvania at this point?
They are definitely relying on the Keystone State and all the efforts they poured into it. They think that they still do have a good chance of succeeding there, but really they need everything else to also go in their favor. So they would need to also win Georgia, for example. There's been discussion earlier this month about whether the Trump campaign could flip Nevada. That's something I'm told they're still thinking is possible, but it's too early to call. And then the other major state that Trump campaign officials have been talking about all day today is Arizona, which some networks have called for former Vice President Joe Biden. NBC News has not projected that yet, but the Trump campaign claims that that could shift in their direction. So we're waiting to see a lot more of the vote come in later today that could help dictate that and frame this picture in a better sense. But I have to tell you, Allison, today the Trump campaign aides mostly huddled and talked about their legal strategy. But you had the chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and then the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, also over there trying to just figure out how to present this to the public. I think it's quite notable that we're not going to hear from the president today on camera. Maybe they felt that his speech overnight actually was more problematic, given the fact that many of the president's Republican allies said they were even distressed by his comments and really prematurely claiming that victory when there's still a big picture left to develop here, Allison.
All right, Monica Alba with the Trump campaign, Mike Memley with the Biden campaign, an election that is still very much not over tonight. Thank you both.
Thanks, Allison.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you. Whether you're back to school.
What do you guys think? We're excited?
Or back to work. We're keeping you safe.
I love being back.
Every morning on Today.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you. Whether you're back to school.
What do you guys think? We're excited?
Or back to work. We're keeping you safe.
I love being back.
Every morning on Today.
Police murder of unarmed black men has been an American way of death across centuries. After seeing the most comprehensive police reform bill ever introduced in Congress, I've begun to wonder if now is the time. If now is the time the protesters finally win.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, weeknights at 10 on MSNBC.
You ready to go to work?
I'm so ready to go to work.
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
A real close-knit group of nurses who pulled together when their boss needed help battling coronavirus.
You're not just any patient. You're their friend.
These folks saved my life. Thank God that there are people who want to run towards a pandemic as opposed to running away from a pandemic. Introducing the MSNBC Daily, featuring written perspectives by experts you know and trust for a better understanding of the stories that matter most. Check out the MSNBC Daily today at msnbc.com.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Are people there concerned about what impact this could have on the election?
It's news made for your streaming world.
Watch what they do, not what they say.
President Trump and Joe Biden hit the trail. At the center of this campaign, coronavirus.
The story.
The battleground blitz as we enter the final stretch of the 2020 race.
From every angle.
If you were sitting here talking to Joe Biden and President Trump, what would you want to tell them right now?
On the ground.
The winds fanning these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
And in depth.
We now have 2 vaccine trials on hold. Should people be concerned?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Some voters in the battleground states shocked by how this election is playing out, coming down to just over a point in Michigan, barely a point in Wisconsin. Here's what they think this tight race says about our country.
I try not to put my personal feelings in it. It's going to be what it's going to be, honestly. And I'm just going to hope for the best. I'm being hopeful. I'm going to be hopeful in reference to whoever wins. If Donald Trump wins, hopefully he'll do some things differently than Joe Biden. So if Joe Biden wins, hopefully he'll do some better things than Donald Trump has done. So we'll just see what the outcome is going to be. And I just hope that whoever gets in that office, that they will do right by the people.
I want Trump to win so badly because I think our country is going to go downhill fast with Biden. He just doesn't do things like they should be done. He has no courage to go ahead with things that need to be done.
I just don't understand this country at all. It should have been a clear victory for Joe Biden. It will be, I believe, but the fact that so many people supported the man who did not lead us during the coronavirus is outrageous.
I voted for Biden, but the most important issues to me as a nation right now is I feel like all of us are we're trying to bounce back far as wise financially. So whoever can, help us recover financially, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Wisconsin is important, and we were looking really good, I think, for a while, up until kind of earlier this morning. We started looking like it's going more Biden.
It shouldn't be close like that. So, well, that's Donald Trump, so we have to deal with it. That's our president.
North Carolina is still too close to call tonight, with 95% of the vote in, Donald Trump leading by a razor-thin margin. But could take several more days to finish the total vote count. NBC News correspondent Tremaine Lee is in Greensboro, North Carolina, outside the headquarters of the Guilford County Election Commission. Tremaine, you've been speaking with election officials there. What's the latest on the vote count, the timing here? What are they telling you?
Allison, as you mentioned, 95% of the vote is already in, but there's only tens of thousands of votes that separate Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Even with that, election officials say it will be quite some time before we have a true count. That's because 117,000 absentee mail-in ballots have yet to make their way back to the courthouses like behind me, where those ballots will be tallied. But behind me, again, there's 2,500 alone, and they expect that number to rise. Now, they won't count these ballots until November 12th. So as long as you got your mail-in ballot postmarked and sent by Election Day, 5 p.m., you have until November 12th to get them to the courthouse where they will be counted. So it's been so tight. There's a lot of anxiety here on the ground because, again, this is a swing state and it's just so close. But hopefully by the 12th or maybe 13th, election officials say we might have a true count.
The 12th or maybe the 13th. All right, folks, we'll hang on a little bit longer. Tremaine, I know earlier you were speaking with voters outside the Woolworth building. It is famous for its lunch counter sit-in back in 1960. It's now the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. What were people telling you? What's their reaction to the election and what we're seeing in this country so far?
Allison, that Woolworths has played such an important role in not just civil rights history, but American history. That's where 4 young men who were students at North Carolina A&T University staged a sit-in, which really sparked a nationwide movement. And when you talk to folks today, they see a clear line between what folks are pushing for today and what they fought for, including this election. It wasn't just Donald Trump and Joe Biden on the ticket. There was racial justice on the ticket. There was full justice for American citizens on the ticket. But let's hear from their mouths what they had to say about that.
If they want to change racism, it's going to take everyone as a whole, This is just like a football team or a basketball team. Not just one player can win the game, but he can put up a lot of points to put his team in position to win the game. But you need the whole team to win the game. So us as a nation, we need our whole nation to change in order for us to make change.
We need our whole nation. One man, one election won't make a difference. But that young man said it's important for all of us to come together. And that's what is concerning a lot of people. Here in Greensboro, which is in Guilford County, leans Democratic, many black voters, similar to Raleigh and similar to Durham. But they do wonder, what's happening in the more rural red counties? What's happening in some of the suburbs? There is a level of disappointment. But again, per election officials, we won't have a true count until maybe next Thursday or Friday. So for many, especially those polling for Joe Biden, there's still hope. Allison?
All right, Tremaine Lee in North Carolina, where it still could be some time before we have final results. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring back our panelists, Steph Kite, a political reporter at Axios, and Anna Palmer, a senior Washington correspondent for Politico. Anna, let me begin with you. There are about 117,000 outstanding absentee ballots in North Carolina, according to the state's Board of Election. President Trump leading by less than 100,000 votes. How much of an impact could those outstanding ballots have? What are you expecting there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's going to have an impact in terms of how much the president numbers actually end up. It's a big number, though, to make up when you look at 117,000 outstanding ballots. He's down by 76,000. That would be a pretty significant number of those ballots that would have to go to Joe Biden. Certainly, for Democrats, still hope, but they aren't counting on this. We aren't hearing today when you're talking about Joe Biden's pathway to 270. There's not a lot of talk about North Carolina.
Steph, we still have not called races in a couple of key battleground states, but Biden is, as we've been telling everyone, leading in the electoral vote count at 253. We know President Trump won North Carolina in 2016. How critical would you say this state is in his path to 270? He's at 214 right now, as you can see there on the graphic.
Yeah, North Carolina will be a pretty important state for Trump to hold on to. Of course, Joe Biden does not need North Carolina, like Anna was saying, and there are plenty of paths to victory for Joe Biden without the state. But it is an important state for President Trump to hold on to if he's going to have a shot at 270. Again, it's looking more likely for Biden at this point to get there, but there are still some outstanding questions. We're still waiting for final results from Arizona and Nevada and, of course, Pennsylvania. But North Carolina will certainly be critical for Trump.
Anna, let's talk about the Senate race for a moment. Too close to call, but Republican Senator Thom Tillis narrowly leading Democrat Cal Cunningham. Democrats just aren't seeing the blue wave they hoped for in the Senate. They really haven't expanded much in Congress in 2020. Why do you think that they failed to meet those expectations?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Senate Democrats had an abysmal night last night. They were hoping to not only, win this seat in North Carolina, but really be able to flip the Senate. This is the third cycle, and that bears repeating, the third cycle that Democrats have not been able to gain a majority in the Senate. Cal Cunningham was a must win for them in North Carolina in order for them to take the majority. Obviously, when you look at what happened with Susan Collins winning in Maine, with Daines winning in Montana, there was a lot of these races that the polling was just wildly off, and Democrats had so much money to spend in a lot of these races that they just were unable to convert wins at the end of the day. And so I think there's going to be a lot of soul searching among Democrats about maybe where their messaging was, where they were spending, what the impact was that they didn't have a strong ground game because of the pandemic. But going forward, I do think you're going to have a lot of soul searching.
All right, Steph, Anna, stay with us. We'll be checking back in with you in a little bit. Donald Trump, the projected winner in Florida, beating Joe Biden 51.2% to 47.8%. Trump's ability to court Latino voters, particularly in Miami-Dade County, gave him a boost. Alicia Menendez is the host of MSNBC's American Voices. She has more on the Latino vote from Miami, Florida.
Allison, we talked a lot about the diversity of the Latino vote that was on full display last night. I'll start here in Florida, where we are. To be clear, a majority of Latino voters in Florida broke for Joe Biden, unlike, let's say, senior voters in Florida or white college-educated voters in Florida who broke for Donald Trump. The reason we ended up talking about Latino voters here in Florida is because some of those eye-popping numbers we saw coming out of Miami-Dade, where you saw Donald Trump making inroads, overperforming among Cuban voters and some other elements of this electorate. So all of that contributed not only to Donald Trump winning the state, but also to Republicans being able to flip 2 key congressional seats. You then go over to Arizona, and it is a very different story. Latino voters there breaking for Joe Biden 2-1. That is a fight that has been 10 years in the making, ever since the introduction of SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law, anti-immigrant legislation. There has been organizing of the Latino community by the Latino community for the last 10 years, and you saw that bear out in the votes coming out of Arizona last night. So you take Arizona as a counterweight to what you saw in Florida, and what emerges as a much more dynamic, complex electorate than we often talk about. I'll finish with this thought, which is Texas. We heard a lot about Texas. What you ended up seeing was Joe Biden overperforming in urban centers, Dallas, Houston, with Latino voters, and actually underperforming Hillary Clinton's number somewhere like the Rio Grande Valley. So it was a very fluid, interesting evening, and both parties are going to have a lot of questions, a lot of introspection coming out of this election as it relates to the Latino vote. Allison?
All right, we promised we'd bring them back, and here they are, our panel. Steph, let's go to you first here. As Alicia reported, within this diverse Latino electorate in Florida, Cuban voters really favored Trump. According to the NBC News exit poll of the early and election day voters, 56% of Cuban voters supported Trump. What do you make of that divide? What would you say the winning message was to Cuban voters to go for President Trump?
You know, I think one of the winning messages, or one of the messages that I think the Trump campaign will say was effective, was just hammering on Democrats as socialists and kind of driving that home among certain communities, Hispanic communities in Florida. And the Latino vote is something that I'll be watching very closely. Obviously, Democrats were hoping to do much better among Latino voters, especially in places like Florida and areas of Texas, and that has not happened, although in Arizona they saw a little bit better success. But, you know, I cover demographic trends for Axios as well, and the Latino share of the electorate is growing substantially. And so figuring out for Democrats and Republicans how to win over those voters is going to be really important for the future of politics in the U.S.
And NBC News exit polling also showed Latino voter support for the Republican Party in Florida has grown with Trump in 2020. What does this mean for Democrats? How do they win back that electorate in Florida?
I think there's going to be a lot of Democrats that spend the next couple of years focused on that. I do think Florida is a little bit different. The president is from there. He has spent a lot of time going there. And they did a much stronger ground game. A lot of my colleagues at Politico were really raising the alarms over the last several weeks of this gap of enthusiasm among Latino voters, that the Biden campaign hadn't done enough, hadn't traveled there enough, wasn't really on air and advertising enough. So I think that's going to be the real question as they dig into the data. But in general, the question I think also is going to be, what's the message that Democrats have? Because a lot of the message this cycle was not Trump. We're not going to be Trump and the coronavirus. And that clearly wasn't compelling for a lot of voters, in Arizona, in Texas, and certainly in Florida among the Latino community. And so how do they message to those voters and get them excited about the Democratic brand?
Steph, what have you heard from the Trump campaign about Florida? Was there ever a concern there? And I guess I should ask what they're saying outwardly versus maybe what they're kind of keeping closer to the vest.
You know, of course, they're always going to say that they're confident in the states that they need to win to get to that 270. I think there was certainly concern at some point. The polls were not always looking in their favor. There was a lot of enthusiasm behind Democrats, according to the polling that we were seeing up until just a few days ago. So there was certainly concern there, but I think they were also confident in their message and were very specific about how they targeted Florida in general and also the Latino community there as well.
Anna, back to the Democrats for a moment. The NBC exit polling is showing that Trump's support in Florida was driven in a large part by voters who do not believe that climate change is a problem. They do not believe that racism is a problem. The issues for them, crime, rebuilding the economy, over containing coronavirus. We know Florida gets affected by some pretty serious hurricanes year after year after the year. How do Democrats need to rethink their messaging to voters in the state going forward if climate change and racism aren't the things that are registering with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when you look at what the Biden voters, it's almost the actual flip of what you have up there on the screen in terms of what was most important to them, in terms of the economy, in terms of the coronavirus, in terms of crime.
Yeah, everything.
It's almost like we're really looking at two different world views at the same time. I think for Democrats, there's, the economy. How are they going to message around the economy, around the climate change in a way that doesn't feel like people's jobs are going to be going away? That is something that they've struggled with not only in Florida, but in Pennsylvania, with fracking and other comments of what is the Green New Deal and is that socialism, and how do the Democrats kind of reconcile themselves with the more progressive end of their party with more centrist or independent voters, or even some Republicans who lean, to a more independent way.
All right, Steph, Anna, thank you both so much for being with us throughout the hour. Very appreciative.
Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you, whether you're back to school.
What do you guys think? We're excited?
Or back to work. We're keeping you safe.
I love being back.
Every morning on Today.